And I tell you, the beautiful part of that, this kind of idea of kind of QAing or QIing, whatever the question is, that like, should we find ourselves here again? It really helps you look through a lens of how could we tackle this? What are the things in the process that need to look and feel differently? And then you start thinking, okay, well, I got this piece, I got that piece. I'm not okay with that piece. That's just not my style, or that's not what I do. You know what? Nick does. Let's get Nick in the mix, right? You can start building these connections and building the relationships and building the bridges that I think a lot of times people don't take the opportunity for, because conflict carries with it such this heaviness and this like negative association. So there's identifying and inviting people to look at conflict a different way has been like, kind of like the pièce de résistance. Like, it's like a chef's kiss when that happens.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Quality Solutions Quality Corner Show. Buckle up and put your thinking cap on. The Quality Corner Show starts now.
Hello, Quality Corner Show listeners, and welcome to our podcast where we discuss medication use and how to utilize pharmacists to improve health outcomes. I'm your host, Nick Dorich, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this episode is live, coming to you also as a video cast for the first time. We often record over video, but only get to use the audio, but hopefully you get to see our smiling faces this time. Fingers crossed that it's working. For today's episode, we're going to jump right into our conversation for the topic, and we're going to introduce our guest. It is a returning guest to the podcast, and previously we've had her on to discuss social determinants of health, to talk health equity, but today we're going to talk about some different items that relate to leadership in healthcare and about a word that most people don't like to deal with. But before we get into that, we're going to introduce our guest. So, Dr. Vibhuti Arya, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Excellent. So, Vibhuti, I know you. If folks have listened to your episodes on the show before, and we'll probably link or reference to those past episodes in the show notes here so that people can go back and listen to them. They're already two of our most listened episodes of the show. But hey, it's great messages. More people should hear it or hear it again. But Vibhuti, do you mind giving us an introduction? So, who you are, what it is that you do in your day job, as in your experience as a pharmacist, and really, because I know this is important to you, as someone that works in public health.
Yeah, so I am a public health pharmacist. I teach actually at St. John's University, my alma mater. I work with the New York City Health Department as my practice site. So students who come on API rotations, they rotate with me as a public health policy and management elective. And really, it's about integrating pharmacists and pharmacies into public health initiatives, particularly in our most medically underserved areas, our priority areas where we try to improve health equity and dismantle structural racism. Easy feat. So that's kind of what I do, is looking at integrating pharmacy into public health practice, but really through the lens of equity.
Excellent. Well, Vibhuti, that's a big job, and somebody has to. We all have a part to play in helping to achieve that. But thank you for taking some time out of your schedule and away from the main responsibilities to have this important conversation with us here today. We're gonna, again, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode. And in our conversation, we will address why this is an important conversation to have on the Quality Corner Show, because it's not something that's specifically about medicines or people, but this all actually does tie into how we as people work, teach, educate, and ultimately help improve the lives of the patients that we're working with, because that really is the goal. But as we know in pharmacy, it's not as simple as taking a medicine. It's so much of the healthcare aspect is how we as people work together. So we're going to jump into that, but real quick, we're going to pause for a moment and hear a quick message from the PQS team. All right, Vibhuti, we're back and ready to jump in for today's conversation. And what we're going to talk about, I addressed this briefly, but we're going to talk about conflict, interpersonal conflict, and how you resolve that. So this is something where I know people are already, in their headphones or in the car as they're driving, listening to this episode, they're thinking, wait, conflict, what does this have to do with healthcare? We're going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about conflict generally. It is something where it can be abrasive and it can be stressful. But Vibhuti, why is it necessary to grow, to evolve, to change, and to really kind of improve our process and the things that we do?
Yeah, so it's probably the thing that raises a lot of eyebrows when I say that I love conflict, including my partners. I'm sure he was very excited about that. I think that generally speaking, when we hear conflict, there's a sort of physical, maybe visceral reaction to wanting to, tense up, shoulders condense, kind of your body kind of feels a lot more tense. And you, for some people, can kind of get triggered into going to like shutdown mode. I think that systemically, across many institutions, cultures, and systems that we operate in, there is a sense of avoidance of conflict, all the way stemming from like interpersonal one-on-one communication to families to systems and organizations. And for me, I think conflict, I see it as an opportunity. I see an opportunity for connection, not just with a person as in our relationship will get closer or not, but really how a connection to how a person perceives value, what they prioritize, what's important to them. And so for me, it's kind of an insightful look at looking at how people can turn how we can turn conflict into creating connections, both again with people, but also in what is important for them.
Yeah, exactly. So conflict, it doesn't always, right? When we hear conflict, we always think of these catastrophic blow-ups or physical altercations. And that is certainly one extreme of what conflict is. But conflict can be a disagreement between coworkers. It can be a stress between a manager and an employee. Conflict can be, and I think this is where it relates into part of why we're having this conversation today. Conflict can be the patient at the pharmacy counter getting upset with the pharmacist or the pharmacy technician because they don't understand why they have a copay or why this, right? That is a form of conflict. So this comes in many different ways, shapes, and forms. But ultimately, conflict it's a bad thing. Many people like to avoid it, and that's typically the response most people have. But Vibhuti, as you said here, it also creates us an opportunity to really kind of change something, form a new connection. And often in life, the things that are most difficult and that push us the most, these are the things that lead us to be stronger people, to lead us to be better people, and to be able to address this in new ways. So I want to transition us to really this idea, perhaps maybe a mantra, maybe it's a slogan. It's something that you love to say and that is really meaningful to you. It's turning conflict to connection. So what does this mean? Can you expand upon this thought? I've got some additional, items here that I may ask you as follow-up questions, but I'll let you respond before I jump into it further.
Yeah, and I think maybe people might be familiar. I've heard it more in the context of relationships with one of my favorite sort of therapists, if you will, Esther Perel. And part of it is really, for me, it's not just a relationship. It's actually inner conflict. So where this stemmed from for me actually was a spiritual basis. It's understanding conflict within oneself, which if anybody has any inclination towards any sort of religious understanding or spiritually with meditation and stuff, that's my other life, really looking at, it's funny to say other life because it's actually super connected, but anyway, but really looking at conflict within the self, right? So a lot of teachings, a lot of elders, a lot of oral traditions, the psychology around human connection and how we look towards counsel and advice really, if you think about it, stems a lot from conflict that you have within. That's what I'm more interested in. So the way I kind of describe it visually is think about kind of having like, we all have energy, right? And so think about like a lot of energy ball, right? Like right here. I don't know if you remember Street Fighter, like, boom. So like having that energy right here where we're dealing with things within ourselves. Why something may trigger me, why something may bring up something inside of me that makes me be defensive or makes me want to fight, or, all the allostatic load, fight and flight kind of thing with stress and coping. But whatever that energy is right now, everything, so visualizing it right here in front of me, everything that you might be delivering to me verbally, non-verbally, that's coming through is kind of going through this lens, right? And so you may not intend things a certain way, but the impact that it's having on me is through the lens of like this stuff that I'm dealing with. And if I am not aware and consciously understanding of what this stuff is, that all my stuff is filtering through, and if I don't like learn to kind of part it a little bit, so that what you're coming at me with, I can receive the way it was intended, or at least understand a little bit of how it was intended, then it's going to likely result in some sort of conflict, right? Because I'm looking at it my way. And what happens is that in my observation and experience, when I've done a lot of trauma work and a lot of facilitation work, is that people then tend to be entrenched in their own polarized views. So you're here, I'm here, and because my perception is that you have no intention or you are not interested in understanding what I'm thinking about, or you're just dealing with a lot of stuff and I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, and none of us have any sort of awareness to, figure out and process that stuff, then we become entrenched in where we are even more so. And sometimes the conflict, what it is kind of like each person's perceived defense and role in like further, sort of rounding into that. And so conflict for me, the insight and the awareness that it gives really is about yourself, right? So that's what I'm talking about, is that the internal awareness, the internal conflict we may have that actually influences the external relationships that we engage with, the external interpersonal relationships, but also how we show up in a system, how we show up in a team, the values we both consciously and unconsciously, or intentionally and unintentionally, impart into the sort of aura of the team, and infuse it in a way that becomes part of a culture.
So when we talk conflict, and Vibhuti, you mentioned this, where folks can often the response is try to avoid or bury, just ignore it. Other folks may dig in and become rigid to it. And when I think about conflict or how we deal with it, it's all about really creating that flexibility, right? Because there are 7 billion people on this planet and growing. There's going to be a lot of people we have conflict with. And simply if we avoid conflict, we're not developing any of our tools to be able to deal with that and the different interactions that we may have along the way. Or if simply we become stuck to just our one own way to deal with conflict, we become very rigid. And over the course of time, that doesn't actually solve conflict. That leads to more conflict with the more people that we meet along the way. That is, unless we stay into our own little echo chamber with thoughts and people that stay really the same way. So really this whole idea about conflict to connection, it's about emotional intelligence, right? Being able to read and understand people, where they're coming from. In a lot of ways, as I think about this idea, it's really, from a pharmacy standpoint, we think about motivational interviewing. This is in its own way motivational interviewing, but for dealing with people on a personal level, right? And how we work through that part of it, how that's going to matter, and why that really makes a difference. Now, Vibhuti, the follow-up question that I want to ask you about this is conflict to connection. There can be an assumption here that this means that we have to resolve the conflict and that both sides need to be happy. But I don't think that's the intention, right? Like we can walk away and we don't need to be we don't need to have the same solution, but maybe we're at least on the same page of an understanding. So can you help us extrapolate that idea?
Yeah, so I'll do that in two parts. One part I would say is I'll challenge this to take it even one layer deep, which is it's actually, before we look at trying to have conflict or think of conflict with others external to us, take it one step internal. So when I do a lot of conflict, like workshops and stuff, and this inevitably comes up, particularly, you're looking at implicit bias and health equity, as you can imagine, a lot of things kind of get stirred up. And one of the things that I kind of offer to people is that there's an invitation there when that happens. Rather than what we've been conditioned, I think, socially a lot to do, particularly, I think, in healthcare, is like turn the thing to patients or turn the thing to your colleagues, like move that inside of you and say, what did this bring up in me? Why do I have the reaction that I have? What is it doing to me? And I think part of what that gives you is an exercise or an invitation to think about ways in which you have to actually figure out why you're feeling a certain way. So what that means is there some sort of thing this reminds you of? Is there an incident that happened that has put you in a constant mode of, feeling this way? And so this is another example of that. There's so many layers to this, but the layer deep that I would invite us all to do is like, okay, hold up, time out. What is this doing to me? And where did that come from? Where did I learn the language that I'm associating with this conflict? Where did I learn that reaction? What is happening to that reaction and how I'm doing this? One of the things that, or I guess the importance of why that's important, is also understanding your own boundaries, right? So when you have that conflict, again, it tells you more about yourself, I think. And when you have more awareness of yourself, The work that you constantly keep doing is deepening that journey within yourself and understanding how you can show up to be the most compassionate person, not to resolve everything and to walk out holding hands. It's to offer compassion. I can understand that I have learned through this conflict. Basically, it teaches me of something that's important to you, and it also might teach me what the limitations of our relationship are going to be. And that's really important. I think that there is a desire or maybe a seduction to want to always have something, nicely packaged and bow tied and kind of saying, great, I know what conflict is because now we're going to go to happy hour together, or now we're like hanging out. And that's not the resolution. So you don't have to be resolving the conflict the way you think a resolution looks like. What that actually means is that you have to be fine with the ambiguity, and you have to be fine about learning about things that you may have discovered or learned about now this person that is pertinent to their journey. They may not be at a point. So I talk a lot about certain things, right? Like health equity, like people sometimes are not where others may be. And so it can get very tenuous sometime in, taking, let's say somebody, it's kind of like, think about pharmacy school, it's not that a P4 student is better than a P1 student. It's just that they have more experience in time and understanding, right? So you can't say that, you can't compare them and say a P4 student is better at explaining ACE inhibitors and ARBs and mechanism of action than like a P1 might be, right? Get all nerdy about this. But a P1 student may just be learning. They're like, what's angiotensin, right? And so that's not a fair comparison. It's just where people are at. So it's important for the P4 student to understand that, okay, you're P1, I see where you're coming from, and I know how to frame this a certain way. And for the P1 to also understand the P4 is not, they're at a different kind of experience, but we can kind of still meet some way. We can learn about where each other is and meet there. So you have to learn, or I guess anybody has to learn that we have boundaries, and that's a really difficult thing. That could be a whole other podcast episode, in understanding how to create and have boundaries. But I think again, that opportunity that the conflict gives you is to learn about what your boundaries might be, right? And how do you cultivate a collective so that you're constantly not battling this one-on-one as your own? You have to have people around you. And what I mean with that collective is not people who tell you you're amazing and you're right all the time. It's people who tell you you're amazing, but also point out that, okay, you might need to let this one go. This might be, where you're at, but the other person's not. Or, gee, I wonder what this triggered in you. It sounded like the same conversation we had last time about a similar situation, and now there's a pattern. So how do we uncover that? So that's a very maybe emotionally mature and evolved conversation, but that's what the collective helps you provide. It's helping and assisting kind of the journey with each other in progressing into a way that's not resolving anything. And I put that in air quotes. It's actually just deepening your understanding of that conflict, what that opportunity has given you, what that invitation has brought you. And really, again, like I said, it teaches you something important about what could be a value or priority for the other person, perhaps. And it also, very importantly, teaches you what the limitations of your relationship may be.
I like to think of that, Vibhuti. It's the sort of idea where, at least in my life, the people that I'm most honest with, or that I feel I could be most honest and forward with, are the people that I'm closest with. And if there's something that's going on, I'm going to tell it to them or let them know about it, warts and all, right? That may be more difficult for, with someone that you don't have that understanding with. And then the other aspect of this, as we talk about conflict, or just as I think about it, we don't necessarily all have to be experts in dealing with conflict in different ways, right? And it is okay sometimes to walk away, right? There are some times where you can see that, hey, there is a way to resolve this conflict, or maybe there's a way that I can work with this person, but there can be instances where it goes against your values or your morals, and being able and respecting your boundaries to say that, hey, this is not a conflict that, right? This whole idea, we're not necessarily that you have to resolve every conflict. And then there are going to be people that are somewhat more rigid in how they resolve conflicts. And I think we all, when we think about our friends or our family, when there are conflicts that come up, there are some times where you say, hey, I need the bulldog to go into this fight for me, right? We all have that one friend when you're at a party or something else like that, or maybe you're out at dinner and you're having a hard time getting the waiter's attention so you can get the check, right? You may need to have the bulldog who goes right up to the waiter stand and finds the host so that you can, that's another way that you may need to resolve conflict, knowing that this is maybe a tool that can do it, but it's not a tool that I feel comfortable with.
And I would say to that, I don't know if that's resolving the conflict. I think it's navigating it, because you haven't really dealt with the problem, which is that I feel discomfort in calling somebody's attention, for example. And I think what that does is there's different ways, right? And this is what I mean about the collective also, is that I have had super deep conversations with like people I just met, because where they're at is that level of authenticity where they're real with themselves and then can be real with me in a conversation that we don't, because maybe we're used to doing the work of going layers deep. There's a certain amount of comfort. There's a certain amount of, just comfort, like being okay with that. And then there are people who I've known for years who probably could not have that level of conversation because that's just not where they are, right? And so I always say that there's just like a dance you play with life. And it's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's not that kind of binary dichotomous feeling. It just is what it is. And I think you have to be good about, if I have the awareness and the insight of where I'm at, I am able to then, right, there's another process then of making sure where I'm at, I'm communicating it with the person. And a lot of times the reason even people, when they know where they're at, may not be able to communicate because now they're constantly worried about how the other person's perceiving it, right? And so that's another layer. So there's lots of layers. We're a beautiful mess, humans, right? It's complex. But the place where that comes in is that, for example, there might be situations where I know that, let's go back to the oversimplified example of like calling the waiter over, right? I know that there are some people who have, for example, social anxiety. I've worked with people and I've had people in my life who are just like, they literally, it's too much stimulation. And so, yes, there are points where like you have the basketball assist, right? Like you just need the assist where somebody comes in and says, you know what, I got this for you. Hang out, do your thing. I'll take care of the situation. Now I do go back to that person and say, okay, my golden question, should you find yourself here again, what could you do differently? These situations will come up again. And so why I love conflict is that it gives you insights so that you can apply that quality improvement to the next situation, right? There are insights that you gain that you can be like, should I find myself here again? I could have done this differently. And so I'm constantly like in that QA cycle with just things that happen in life. And it's a lovely way for me to engage with somebody because it doesn't blame people. It doesn't say, Nick, why didn't you say ba-da-da-da-da? It's more like, okay, Nick, you and I had a conflict. Should we find ourselves here again, which we probably will? What could we do to kind of take us to the next level of this? So we're not at the same level and the same surface of conversation. And I think that's the other piece is that it's not like I tell my children this, right? I don't ever tell them like, don't fight. And because it sends this message that like conflict is bad. It's not something you should be doing. I'm like, okay, how do I prepare you for when the conflict does occur? Because it will occur. Conflict is bound to occur, both within you and outside of you. And how do you deal with that? And so maybe in that other scenario where a person's like, I don't want to call the waiter over, call the server over, you can say, you know what? I'm right here with you. And I will be with you when you go through this and come out on the other side, right? Is it helpful if you have that relationship to hold a hand? Is it helpful to say you got this? Is it helpful to provide affirmation, right? It's not always going to be looking the same, but how do we resolve? So like some of the things I use is when I see kind of two or multiple parties at it, it's okay. Nick, I'm hearing that is really important to you. And that's kind of the central thing that's emerging from what I'm hearing. Did I get that right? Right? Teach back method, motivational interviewing, right? Resolving addressing discrepancy. I'm hearing that you want to be able to lose weight. And I'm hearing it's really hard for you to restrict food intake or kind of food intake because it's tied to your emotional well-being because that's what we call a comfort food, right? So let's go layers deep and figure out. So the first thing of that is like acknowledging that, am I even hearing correctly, right? What I'm noticing may not be what you're intending. So how do we resolve that? How do we figure that discrepancy out? Here's what I'm hearing. Did I get that right? Okay, now let's move to the next level. What are your goals with this? What are the things you might want to be able to do? And really recognizing, just like motivational interviewing, right? Like this is not about me. It's not about my agenda. And I have students when I teach MI, I'm like, write down, this is not about you, boo, right? Like this ain't about you. This is not something that you get to impose your agenda or your values or your priorities onto the patient. It has to be shared decision making. Similar ways, I may be in conflict with you as I'm talking to you, or maybe you and I are at the board table and we're talking and a conversation comes up where we can find no resolution. All right, well, let's go back and figure out what is it that's bothering us about the situation. And I tell you, the beautiful part of that, this kind of idea of kind of QAing or QIing, whatever the question is, that like, should we find ourselves here again? It really helps you look through a lens of, how could we tackle this? What are the things in the process that need to look and feel differently? And then you start thinking, okay, well, I got this piece, I got that piece. I'm not okay with that piece. That's just not my style, or that's not what I do. You know what? Nick does. Let's get Nick in the mix, right? You can start building these connections and building the relationships and building the bridges that I think a lot of times people don't take the opportunity for, because conflict carries with it such this heaviness and this like negative association. So there's identifying and inviting people to look at conflict a different way has been like, kind of like the pièce de résistance. Like it's like a chef's kiss when that happens. So, for example, I went to Dublin at Trinity College at Trinity College, basically, as a visiting professor. And one of the things, and they were just like, who is this? Like, why are you trying to talk about trauma and health equity and like conflict? I thought that we were going to get a lesson about like race and ethnicity. And I'm like, well, let's actually get into like a lot of this conflicts. We sat in a circle. We were in theater space that I requested because it's just a different field than being around a table where I don't get to see your body language. And as we were talking, one of the persons who kind of was with me throughout the 3 days said, all day long, said, I don't do conflict aversion is like my thing. I avoid it. I want everybody to be in harmony and peace. I don't really think I have much conflict. So we're good. And day 3, as we were debriefing at the end, she was just very quiet. We're doing this trauma session. There were a lot of tears and such. And she said, you really made me think about conflict very differently. And there's been a lot of stuff that's been coming up for me that I don't even think I was aware that I had. And the reason we do like a debrief and kind of coming together at the end is so you don't leave people feeling kind of raw, if you will, because for many people, this could be the first time that they're looking at conflict this way, as an invitation, as an opportunity, right? There's a dissonance between like what has been associated with that word, and now what you're inviting them to do. It's a little bit different. So it's a beautiful thing in my mind and experience when that happens, but it is a journey to getting that to happen. And I think all of us through our experiences will learn that, maybe Nick and I thought we were at a place about conflict, but, maybe we need to go 2 steps back and kind of revisit it. And there has to be humility in that. There has to be a certain sense of honesty and authenticity to say like, my bad, like this was not, there were a couple of missteps here. Let's go back and kind of figure that out, rather than demonizing the other person and saying, no, you're wrong. You did this way and that's it. We're done. So there's an invitation there somewhere. And again, I think part of what you may struggle with, or we all may struggle with, is sometimes the other person doesn't take that invitation too, and that has to be okay also.
Yeah. So with that, Vibhuti, I want to transition us to really kind of putting the exclamation point on this conversation. And we came in saying that it may be a bit uncertain or confusing why we're having this conversation on a podcast that's typically about pharma-assisted medication use. But I'll note, this is a podcast, and we at PQS, we focus on quality improvement. And quality improvement inherently is going to be about improving. It's going to be about, to some extent, I would say, embracing conflict, moving right and not moving past it, but embracing the conflict, adapting as necessary in ways that can sometimes be painful, and sometimes that may take us out of the comfort zone, but with the intention of, these are in a practical sense, this is about making changes to our pharmacy practice, to our public health practice, so that we can improve the healthcare, improve the outcomes of the patients and our communities that we're serving. That is the ultimate goal. And at least from my standpoint, when you brought this up as the topic, and hey, can we talk about this on this particular episode? To me, it was absolutely, we need to understand our audience, we need to understand, we need to embrace that conflict is necessary for growth. But it's not necessarily conflict is necessary. It's about how we address it as a follow-up. So, throughout the episode here today, you talked about how social determinants of health, equity, you talked about even giving references on the differences between students that are a P1 and P4, how items that may be seen as conflict or differing skills aren't really about what their knowledge is or what their education is. But, any other points that we haven't hit on about why this is an important conversation and why this is an important skill to develop as a healthcare provider?
Yeah, so I think that the exclamation point maybe to kind of envelop this whole conversation really is that if we do not embrace conflict, and if we do not make the connection between like having a really solid QI process, a quality improvement process, and embracing conflict, we might actually be contributing to an insidious culture that actually asks us not to be honest about that. And so what we need to do is sow the seeds of change that long before we're departed and transitioned from this planet, hopefully are still bearing fruit for others, right? Like, I think inherent to the QI process is looking for pain points, is looking for things that could be better. That's the whole point, essentially. And so to do that, you have to have, I have to have, we have to have as a team, as a collaborative, and maybe a practice of humility and accountability. And I think that part of why people may run away from conflict, even like now people are using the word accountability, in the water, right? It's like accountability, but accountability is not punishment. And I think that's how, in my experience and observation, I've seen it used quite a bit. We need to hold people accountable. It's not punishment. It's a call. It's an invitation, perhaps. I like to use that word very deliberately because it seems a lot more holistic. It's not like trying to be sly and catch you. It's actually an invitation for us to be like, okay, what can we do better? So I think that the cultural mindset shift that has to happen is, rather than looking at this as a pain point, which it will be, we know through humans and anatomy and, civilizations and ancestry that pain is kind of good for you too. Like, there are things about pain that are not just negative, right? Other parts of when you're in pain, for example, other hormones and other things come to your aid to actually ease you through that. And I think that sometimes as a culture, as a society, we get stuck in the pain and the negative aspect. And so it sends this sort of subconscious message, again, contributes to this insidious culture of like, that's bad, to we're going to be right here as we go through it. We're going to be right here with you as you come out of it. And that has to be the commitment, right? That's a good QI process. We're going to go in, things are going to get revealed. We may not like it. We may feel guilty. We may feel bad. We may feel like, missed the boat on that, or, oh no, we made this. But by identifying, acknowledging, I want to say that again, because that seems to be also a thing that people shy away from. Acknowledge what's going on, and let's figure out a way to move through it, because we will be with you and together, and life is going to keep moving on the other side. And that has to be a crux of kind of sowing that. And I think for leadership, that's so important, because how you as a leader may kind of cultivate that change, may promote that change, may acknowledge the necessity of that, will actually help people in your team who are prone to that kind of thinking, who may be like, I don't know, I'm shy to talk about this, or I don't want to because of retaliation or whatever else, or it seems like it goes against the grain. It can bring that out in that invitation to actually get a collective brain and trust going. And that's how you move things forward. It's not for me and you to fix everything tomorrow. It's for us to kind of sow the seeds of change that are going to outlive us, right? Outpace us. And that's the piece that we want to be focusing on as a collective unit, as a way for us to improve these systems. It's not just me and you in conflict, right? We can work on ourselves, but we have to also work on the system. We have to work on the insidious culture. We have to improve that in a way that's going to lend itself to be better, right? And hold itself accountable so that we're not the only ones saying this stuff. It has to be the vernacular of everybody. It has to be the vocabulary that everybody feels like, yeah, of course, accountability, totally. Should we find ourselves here again? What could we do differently? Let's do this. There should be an invitation and excitement and enthusiasm about embracing QI for the self, right? Internal conflict, and for the external processes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a continuous process. That's one thing at PQS when we work with our clients externally, internally. Quality improvement, it is a continuous process. It has to be. There's not a form of perfection that exists for us as the humans, right? Anything.
It uncovers barriers. It uncovers barriers, right? That then you can be like, we did not think about this. We weren't thinking that this seemingly non-pharmacy, med use behavior topic seems like that's a thing we need to tackle.
Can we?
Interesting. Yep. Uncovered something new. And that's where you can look at conflict and find the connection, again, between yourself and, within yourself, but also within these processes.
Yeah. So this is absolutely, and like I said, we were looking to put an exclamation point in on this topic of Vibhuti. I think we hit maybe 2 or 3 exclamation points on the keyboard here to really hammer this message home, because it is something that we're going to be working with. And the other thing that I'll just say here, progress is rarely linear, right? There are going to be parts where it is very much it's very much going to be hyperbolic, and there's going to be parts where that progress, it may seem like you're going downwards, but there's going to be parts where you are the rocket ship going up to space. And it's just that part where, as long as we're continuing to be intentional, for making these changes or embracing it, that is the important part that we'll look to address.
That's part of the culture shift. Like going deepening it sometimes means that you're going to uncover more stuff and pain.
Sometimes, right? Yep. Sometimes you got to dig things out of the closet before, right? You got to dig things out of the closet so you can become the new you.
Yeah. So like, when people have actual pain and you got to like feel around, and that diagnostic procedure or whatever, right? Yeah. Like that kind of feeling around to understand the underlying root of it might actually need to press on things and cause more pain. So it's the comfort with that process that I think will carry us through.
Fantastic. Well, Vibhuti, before we wrap up today's episode, that does wrap up our primary conversation about the idea of conflict to connection and why that's meaningful and why that's a necessary part of the quality improvement process for those of us in healthcare. But we want to ask a few questions of you to get to know you as a person a little bit. I can almost promise that these won't be painful, that these are probably going to be some comfort questions for you. The first one is probably an easy one. What do you enjoy most about working in the field of pharmacy?
Ooh, I love bringing pharmacy into the context of public health and vice versa. And I think having, for me in education, kind of like a la Bell Hooks practice of freedom, which is that being part of somebody's journey as they're looking at things and kind of, I would say, like lacing it with that social accountability, I think to me is the most exciting thing that hopefully will continue and outlive me.
Okay. Next question here. What fictional character would you want to work with you for your pharmacy and public health experience?
Oh, I don't know. Fictional character. I don't know. Maybe a Sherlock Holmes type. I kind of like the conventional ways. I'll have to think on that more, but maybe Sherlock Holmes.
Okay. All right. Next question. If you have one recommendation to provide about living a happy and healthy life, what would it be?
Ooh, embrace conflict, baby.
I should have prefaced with that with one that's not part of the conversation today, but that is acceptable.
I think doing the work and being, I don't know. I'm very spiritual with this, so it's like finding something to connect to that's larger than yourself, I think provides a way for us to tap into maybe the unknown where we as a society seem to want the answers to all the time, but being okay with not having all the answers and just showing up and doing your best always. And knowing, I would say there's like the 3 W's that I like to reference: a worrier, and a withdrawer. And there are times when we have all three manifest.
Yep.
There are times when we may be more in one phase than the other. But finding your community through that, I think, is a basic tenet of how I live. Doing the work on your own, but finding your community. It's really, really important. Also Sherlock Holmes, because he always looks for the stuff that's not very obvious, and I love to do that.
That's a good point. All right, Vibhuti, last question. What game show or reality TV show would you want to appear on?
Oh my God, I don't think I'm really into reality TV or game shows. Does SNL count?
Yeah, that counts. That would count. At least it does in my book.
SNL. I wanna talk to Jon Stewart.
Okay.
Black Lady Sketch Show. That would be really cool to work with.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
comedy. Yeah, I was gonna say improv comedy.
Yeah, that also
Solid.
like deal with actual issues, right? And don't shy away from. It's like entertainment plus. Again, I think actually like that's kind of a technique that I use because I used to do improv and theater. It's more utilizing that to get people to have connections and I guess peer into themselves in ways that, they didn't think they were about to do.
They wouldn't otherwise.
See that process happen.
Okay, excellent. Well, Vibhuti, I thank you for the conversation today and our chat here on turning conflict to connection. Before we go, if folks want to hear more from you, or if they have questions for you about this topic, or maybe public health, or maybe they went back and listened to your other episodes on SDOH and health equity, but what's the best way for folks to reach you?
I would say you can email me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can email me. You can connect at vibhutiarya.com. Might be an easy way, but yeah, I would love to hear from you and hear all about conflicts too.
Excellent. Well, Vibhuti, thank you for your time here on the show. Thanks for the lessons and conflict and connection. And then for our listening audience, that does wrap up this show. So we thank you for listening to another episode of the Quality Corner Show. We hope you join us next time. But until then, we have one final message from the PQS team.
Thank you so much for having me. And I will just say to an acknowledgement, none of us do this stuff alone. And so I'm not here as an expert or, any sort of thing on this topic, but really my acknowledgement and connection for all the people who've come before me and the giants whose shoulders I stand on. So that's a responsibility I hold, dearly to my heart, and I hope that everybody can tap into as well.
Thanks, Vibhuti.
Thank you.
The Pharmacy Quality Solutions Quality Corner Show has a request for you. Our goal is to spread the word about how quality measurement can help improve health outcomes, and we need your help in sharing this podcast to friends and colleagues in the healthcare industry. We also want you to provide feedback, ask us questions, and suggest health topics you'd like to see covered. If you are a health expert and you want to contribute to the show or even talk on the show, please contact us. You can email info@pharmacyquality.com. Let us know what is on your mind, what we can address, so that you are fully informed. We want you to be able to provide the best care for your patients and members, and we wish all of you listeners out there well.